term, in 5 to 10 years, is the only sustainable angle. It's always been that the ethical angle is sustainable in the long term, because you deal with in creative cultures, you have to have that relationship with people. It's not just numbers on a page, it's do they trust you? And that's kind of one of the cornerstones of blockchain, is the whole trust issue. So the arguments have changed over the years. Artists are making money from it. If they look at this, step back and look at the big picture, and it's a godsend that companies like these two are in there for the ethical reasons. And the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, we'll see how that develops. Very exciting times.
Thank you. So what specifically is Ditto doing to sort of aid transparency and fairness for artists?
We're doing as much as we can. Bear in mind that if someone gets paid £250 from a song on Spotify, I'm only taking Spotify's word for that. And the artist is only taking my word for it that I'm not lying. Which I'm not, if I was lying and they actually made 300 and I kept £50, and Spotify were lying and they actually made 500 and they kept the rest, and so on and so on, if the credit card company took a little bit more than they actually were supposed to, then it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Whereas if you had a blockchain in place, I mean, that would kind of wipe me out of the entire equation, which is fine, because we'll just do something else. So I'm not bothered really. But it means that the artist would actually get fairly paid, because they would know that so-and-so down the road with Bitcoin address there pay this amount of money, and 15 minutes later the money was in the account, even though it is maybe 0.000 whatever, bypasses the entire system. There's no reason why you couldn't have an entire streaming service, worldwide streaming service, just based off a blockchain that's completely irrelevant to Spotify. I mean, in the same way as blockchain will take over banking to get rid of these ridiculous banking fees we have for no reason. They take our money and then charge us every day after that. Whereas if you have like a streaming service that uses the blockchain, where the money goes straight from, it's like peer-to-peer, the money goes from the fan straight to the actual artists, with a very, very minimal, some just to cover the costs in the meantime, and the whole thing's entirely transparent. There's no reason why I said in 5 years' time, or Spotify and these streaming systems won't be completely eradicated, maybe 10 years' time, and guys like these will be running the show, because artists will take a step back, look, and think there is no transparency in what I'm getting at all. Just because Ditto told me I made £200, that could be an absolute lie for 5 to 10 different reasons. Whereas with the transparency means you can trustworthy, and that's good for the artist, because they know they're getting more money, they know they're getting paid correctly.
I think you've summed it up brilliantly, and that is the fundamental problem with streaming services at the moment, is that there isn't this transparency and there isn't fairness, there isn't equality in terms of what you get paid. So whilst the averages may look good on paper, what it comes down to is, as I'm sure all of you already know, a small portion of very well-known artists scooping up much more money than the sort of newer artists, and especially the independent artists, and that's where we really want to make a difference. And also, just to get perspective on it, there was some recent research by the FAC, Featured Artists Coalition, and they looked at how artists are making money, and still the vast majority, even for much smaller artists, of their income comes from live, and the streaming came way down the bottom of the list.
Great. So, I mean, what are the big developments for you in streaming, and what does that mean for artists?
Well, we, right from the start, have made everything super transparent. I don't know if you're familiar with Stream to Own, which is our model. It's a system of micropayments, and people get paid a small amount for every stream, and then by the time you get to the 9th stream, the fan is paid the equivalent of a download and can download the track, or you can fast forward if you love the track. And you can see it clearly on the screen. You see a little dot light up each time that you've played a track, and that money is going to go to the artist. So it's a very direct operation. And what's been really exciting for us, because we're in beta, we haven't fully launched yet, but the debate is changing. And I think working with people who believe in transparency and working, getting together really can stimulate a whole new approach to fairness and transparency in the industry.
So you're working with more and more distributors using your services because they believe in your streaming model.
Yes, because they want to be with us.
Interesting, that's great. And for you, the latest developments in streaming and sort of your thoughts?
Well, I think our model is in development still, and we're looking at how, because there's blockchain use cases on audio streaming, but also I think a huge aspect of it is video streaming on blockchain as well, which lends itself to the tokenized economy and cryptocurrency. So we're looking in a really interesting model that kind of taps into that, and I think will the platforms of the future be combined? Because obviously everything's been separated in the past with YouTube and SoundCloud. So I think that's a really interesting one, and how I'd be interested to know how Resonate think about video streaming, and if that's something you're thinking about. But that's definitely something in our core offer that we're trying to get the investment for.
Yeah, interesting. And what do you both think about the co-op type model of the streaming? Where the subscriptions are paid out on a pay-to-play basis.
Well, I think the co-op thing is about the ownership of the company, as well as I know Ditto are looking at the ownership of artists in the tokenized economy. We're kind of looking more on the song side of things, so you get more, as an artist, I don't think I'd want to give myself as a token. I think it would feel a bit too personal for me. I'd probably want to go more individual and have that kind of choice, because it's all about emotion and passion to what song you like. And then I think the whole industry makes its money from intellectual property of songs. So it's how can you really protect that IP at that early stage? So as soon as you write a song and upload it, how can you have a better system that kind of tracks that and then makes money on the blockchain?
So just going back to the cooperative model though, I mean, we think it's absolutely essential that people own the technology they use, and we've seen how badly things can go wrong where there is no accountability in giant tech organisations. And so with our model, if you're an artist, if you're a fan, if you're a label owner, you have a share in the cooperative, and you can then help vote, make choices on the direction and what we should be doing. And then there's a whole load of other platform cooperatives out there who are joining together, and so there's power in numbers, but the accountability and people being able to have their say is really vital.
I think we're not involved in the co-op model. We just kind of do our kind of separate thing, I guess. But I think the transparency and ethics, as I said before, transparency and ethics is absolutely vital for any creative company that wants to be around in a couple of years' time. In the last 13 years, I've gone to countless conferences and exhibitions and things like that, and I'll see one company 1 year and not seeing the next. And it's usually a technology company who have sandwiched themselves into the music industry somehow, loosely, and then I think they can turn up and just take people's money. But I said, creative industry isn't about numbers on the page. It's about 2 + 2 is yellow. What does it smell like? So it's, I think Peter Gabriel that was anyway. So it's about so much more than that. So the ethics of the co-op are there. The only stumbling block from outside perspective, the only obstacle I can see with it is exactly the same obstacle as you have with blockchain. But also the same obstacle the internet had 20 years ago is adoption. So for the artists can see why this is a good thing. They can see why they're being able to speak directly with their fans. They're being able to have that relationship. They're getting paid correctly for once. And the transparency's there, so that's great. The only thing is getting fans, moving them from Spotify and iTunes over to the co-op model. Now, the fans, if you explain the ethics to them, they would agree. This is great. On the other hand, even looking at piracy, which torrents obviously still exist, you can't argue with free. Or so, what's in it for the artist. But it was the same thing with the internet. I mean, like, it was what was in it for being on the internet? And like 20 years ago, it was just nerds and weirdos talking to each other on command lines. Whereas now, I mean, like I was saying earlier, on my honeymoon, we went on a day trip to a desert island, really middle of nowhere. Took a day to get there on a boat, and there's fishermen's wives sitting around on Facebook. They're in a paradise island in the Maldives, the most secluded one place, and they're literally looking down on Facebook. Whereas 10 years before that, maybe they weren't. Whereas in 10 years' time, will they be sorting out their Bitcoin accounts because they've Mohammed the fisherman, the husband's just sold the fish at the restaurant. You can track the path of it. So I think for now it's one of the hard, it's a great model and it's ethical and I absolutely love it. The only problem is going to be adoption. But I said with any system that's new, it will come in time if it's the right system and you can show people there is something in it for them.
So
It's about, sorry, I'll just come in very quickly. It's about building communities, and artists have communities. We have a lot of plans for further artists and fan services to develop that community, and also at a very basic level, fans will be sharing in the profits of the cooperative as well as the artists. So it's a model that benefits everyone.
So do you think there is a shift, and more of a focus and an awareness of fairness for artists? Do you think in the industry? So Spotify with their producer credits, and I think that's a shift happening.
Absolutely. I think also the listing of Spotify really focused people's minds. We noticed a huge change in the debate, also an interest in us, because suddenly people realised a lot more sharply there was a ton of money floating around and where was it all going. And as an artist, I'm on the platforms. With Ditto in my band and obviously on Spotify, and suddenly they're being nice to the artists, and you can access it directly and put your own bio up, and you think, oh, that's very nice, but why are they having to do it just now? And I think that's because the debate is changing. Good.
Yeah, there you go. Right. The reason that there's producer credits in iTunes and the reason there's all this buying information and they're trying to get all data off it is this has been going, it's a trend that's been going on. It was spearheaded by iTunes, as any data initiative is, and then Spotify adopted it shortly afterwards. It's so that, what's the Apple home device? What's it called? I actually don't know. There's one you can speak to.
Siri.
No, and the other one, there's like a thing.
HomePod.
That's the one, probably. Let's call it a HomePod. Good name. Anyway, say it's called that. Or for instance, there's Siri, or there's the Siri's great, obviously it's on your phone. Is that if you say into your phone, I want, you find who produced this track, it will tell you. Can you show me other tracks by this producer? There it is. It's there. So we can only do that with the data. Because previously, at the moment, the only data I get back from sales data, for instance, is artist, song title, ISR, some kind of code, and a number, and that's about it. The only information we send, the only stuff they asked for up until recently was basically the same. What's the name of the artist? What's the name of the song? And that's pretty much it. But if you want to have that kind of data-driven stuff, and obviously it's good for Apple, because if they can have, Apple Music will be integrated within this HomePod. So if someone says, oh, well, can you play me something by Elbow? Oh, what else did Guy Garvey sing on? Is that his name, Guy Garvey? What else did the Guy Garvey sing on? Has he produced any other tracks? There's this, it opens up, and what happens then? The track plays on Apple Music. And then, and also they've bought the HomePod as well. So it's just a way of, as social media networks have been doing for a long time, is monetizing the data that we are happily giving them. Although it is good for artists though, because if you played guitar on a track, Terry, if you played guitar on a track and someone liked the guitar, who played guitar on this track? Terry Tilsley, is it?
Thank you. Yes,
Terry
I
Tilsley
did play guitar on numerous tracks.
There we go. Terry Tilsley did. All right, can you play me anything by Terry Tilsley? Well, here's her band. Bang, there we go. And you just got a new fan. So it is good, but like I said, with the adoption, it's like it needs to work on both sides. So with this, it's like we're giving them all this data, which is for a reason, because they're going to make money out of it and they're going to enhance their systems with it, which will make even more money, because obviously Apple Music, Spotify competing. But also it is good for the artist, because as with Spotify, it aids in discoverability.
Can I just step in very quickly?
Yeah, sure.
One thing that's really interesting, following on from that, this is a brilliant panel already, is it's very interesting to see how Imogen Heap is trying to create a new way of artists controlling their data and there being a central place for their data with a creative passport, because obviously it's important that artists can do that. I mean, if we, how many times do you have to type new stuff in or try and get to know music brains far more intimately than you'd like to? And we, as artists, should be making money out of our own data. And the idea with her project is to make sure we have these creative passports with everything in there, and that makes music more trackable, and also if somebody wants to use it for a sync or is using it in some kind of mix or wants to remix it, that it's very easy to identify. So yes, it is.
Yeah, but the thing is,
and then I think just following on from that, then it's the blockchain and then licensing that and doing the smart contracts with brands. So the artist is completely in control of the business side of monetizing the IP.
The thing is, at the moment, they're not with Apple and Spotify. If you give them data about Terry playing guitar on tracks tracks 1 through 170, Apple owns that data, and it's a centralized data storage. Whereas if the entire credits for every song were on a blockchain, you couldn't argue with it because it would have been sorted out at the studio level and with smart contracts, and you couldn't have. I was in a gym in Vermont 4 weeks ago, and talking to the guy there who was listening to some music. It turns out he was actually in a soul funk band in 1980. They had a song that sold 150,000 records. Back at that time, that wasn't too bad. It would have made a bit of money. He's never got a penny since. He phoned up ASCAP and they say, we have no records of you ever making any money. His song would have got airplay somewhere, surely, but he's never made any money for it, and he has no data at all to track this. Whereas with blockchain, that would have never happened in the first place. He would have been able to track it, find out where he was getting paid, and get paid fairly. Say, for instance, that track was worth 50 grand in airplay royalties over its lifetime. Who actually got that? Probably Kanye West, or I don't know, or Nile Rodgers at the time, whoever it was. Someone else that got black boxed, and someone else got that money. In Brazil, 80% of the money owed to independent artists never actually reaches them. I think worldwide it's probably about 50% of money to independent artists never actually goes to the correct people. It just makes Kanye West a bit richer.
And a quick aside, unless I've been demoted, I'm membership manager, not coordinator. But anyway, that's not relevant.
Tell you something.
So I think actually what I could have done early on, we're all supposed to be experts in blockchain by now, and I know I'm not. So hands up, who knows what blockchain is specifically? Okay, maybe it might be a good idea. So ultimately, blockchain is a new way of accounting in the music industry. And I think it'd be great if maybe you could sort of talk about what blockchain is and how it relates to the industry and how you're using that technology.
Okay.
Just to, not a lesson in it, but maybe if we could just explain what it is and then see if anyone wants to add to it, then we can really sort of think about it in the context of what we're talking about.
Okay, I'd like to give a definition, and I'm always on a fishing expedition for new definitions because everyone's got a new way of describing blockchain, so I just pick the best one, so I claim no credit for this. But my favourite recent one from Music Tech Fest Stockholm is a Professor Marcus O'Dare, who writes lots of books about blockchain, and his beautiful description was, he said, the technologists will hate this, but this is how you can understand it. And it's like a Google Doc without Google. So it's synchronized, and there's one source of truth, and you cut out the corporate middleman. So that's a sort of slightly anti-corporate take on blockchain. But what it enables, as we've already heard, is smart contracts, which means you can do things like distribute payments to people who worked on track instantly. It enables artists to monetize so many aspects of their catalogue, and it enables decentralization and whole new communities to spring up, because people sort of hear about blockchain and crypto and think there's only a few, but actually you can do your own.
So when you say it enables decentralization, what does that mean, and what is that doing for an artist?
For an artist, it means that you can be more directly involved in your career. Mm-hmm. We have this transparency, and I know that it's often very tied up with crypto, which is something you've got
I mean, I think as I'm learning about it, I think everyone's got their own little interest on what angle they want to use it and are exploring the use cases. But it's about me. It always drives down to the intellectual property of a song, the writers involved, the payment systems, it's transparent payment systems to those artists, and then you're in control of your IP on a platform where you can then say, I want to, because it's the power of a song in the industry that the artist loses, I think, when they kind of sign partnerships. So if you've written a song, essentially, you should be able to, through ecosystem and network of a co-op, monetize that globally to interested music fans and businesses, because no matter what happens in the industry with technology, everyone will want to make money or get involved in a good song. So it puts the power of the artist you know, in their creation, you know, and the people that write it and the people who are part of that production, whether it's the producer, the mixer, you know, in the past, songwriting teams, I mean, there was a very interesting interview with Paul McCartney, and he talked about Love Me Do, and he said, you know, he said George kind of just came in the studio and created this riff, and that riff is a major part of the song, but it's only Paul and John.
And I love it.
Sorry?
And I love it.
Oh, that's it, yeah, sorry, yeah, that's it. It's only Paul and John that have the royalties for that song. So why doesn't George have a 30% if that's a key part of that song? So I think this is what blockchain will do. You know, it's really interesting to kind of protect those, you know, integral parts of what makes a hit song, and then monetizing, you know.
I saw a very concrete example of this at Music Tech Fest in Stockholm over the weekend. And because another way of looking at blockchain is a set of machine-readable rules. So you set the rules, the machines sort of spring into action, theoretically. And so Imogen Heap did a special performance in a decommissioned nuclear bunker, and it was recorded, and she decided to release one of the songs. It was a live version of one of her songs. And as an experiment, she gave all the audience, each member, a QR code, and decided that she would give them, she would share 50% of the royalties of this live track for a year with those members of the audience who registered. And they created an interface for that. And imagine the complications and the paperwork of doing it via any other route. But here it's an automatic thing, and it's a special privilege for the people who are part of that performance. And they will, who knows how much they'll make, but it's a really nice experiment, very practical.
I think that's the future of where it will explode. You know, because it's the people power aspect and support of ownership. And I think most artists, you know, because you kind of sign a contract and give 30% away, 40%, 20%. But I quite happily, I'm sure most people would give 30% out to the public or businesses, you know, who want to own that. You know, I mean that's the true power, isn't it? I think.
For me, blockchain takes out the middleman from every single part of your life. So if you're an Uber driver, it means Uber doesn't exist anymore. Because your entire history is on the blockchain, which shows your reviews, which is very, very important because of trust, obviously with the rider as well. But there would be no middleman, because like decentralized storage, which means basically every record is fragmented over so many servers across the entire world. That it has to be accurate, because to change it, you'd have to change every single server. You get it. So but it establishes the relationship in between one person and another with no one else in the middle. For instance, theoretically, it would obliterate all banks, because banks are middlemen that hold your money and make loads of money for it and charge you for it. Whereas if Kevin pays me £10, he has to do it via a bank, theoretically. Or he can just say a ledger where I hit £10 more and he gets £10 less, because that's effectively what it is. It's just a mark of what everybody has. So I think now we're such in the infancy of blockchain and what it can accomplish. We're like the internet was in 93, 94. It's something amazing that we know is going to change everything. We're not exactly too sure what's going to happen yet. But the possibilities over the next few years of some kid who's probably 11 years old now, in some bedroom in Romania, is going to come up with this amazing thing that changes everybody's life in 5 years' time. Because these kids have grown up with blockchain. You know, I didn't get my first mobile till 20 years ago when I was 20. So these kids have grown up with that. But it's obviously it has to wait for the adoption. The fishermen's wives on the Paradise Island. That has to happen over time. So there's so many. It's hard to say what's going to happen because there's so many ideas that could happen within music and within the rest of our lives. And basically, it's up to you guys to figure that one out.
Because can blockchain really mean fairness for artists? Because actually, it's still people deciding what rate you're giving artists and how much you're sharing of. So really, is blockchain making the difference, or is it people that's going to save the industry rather than blockchain?
Well,
Is blockchain going to save the industry ultimately?
no, nothing will save the
I mean,
industry.
do we want to save the industry? That's the question.
Well, it depends which part of the industry.
Stand on that.
Depends which part of the industry you want to save. I'd be quite happy for the major labels to crash and burn overnight. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But you know, for our sector within the independents, where we're led by ethics, where they don't really know, then for our side, transparency is blockchain is like trust. That's kind of the two words are kind of interchangeable, really. So if there's trust in between the independent sector, the business side of it, plus the artists, going out to the fans as well, then for one thing, major labels couldn't ever operate within a trust environment because they've been corrupt for so long and ripped so many people off. I mean, we've been doing some stuff in Latin America over the last year or so. It's mind-boggling what they've been getting away with over the last 50 years or so. If that ever came out, they would fold overnight. Whereas because we're led by ethics in the independent scene for the most part, then I think it just takes a few innovators to come up with a decent idea, for that to be onboarded, and I think we will thrive with it.
I mean, I think just there's a deeper thing about what the industry is and the sound of the industry, and actually it's the empowerment of grassroots artists and artists that really culturally inspire other cultures and cross cities. Those artists that don't get backed because the sound of the music industry is very monitored. So look at Jake Bugg, and artists like that who are very manufactured based around an old Bob Dylan image and sound, and actually it's really bad for the industry, to kind of really get those independent inverted comma artists out there in the public that people think they're independent. I mean, Noel Gallagher had a quote to say he got him on a support tour, and then he was gutted that he had industry writers. So that's really unhealthy for music. I don't want to put Jake Bugg down, but it's unhealthy. And all these really artists who need to write music and create music and are actually the seeders of emotion and passion that the brands want and everyone wants, the industry writers want, and they'll take that to kind of form their own hits. That's where I see blockchain and cryptocurrency and these co-ops really changing, and people term like revolution quite, and movements. I mean, we use the word movement as well, but that's where the change will come, and like decentralised.
Yeah, and to answer your question, blockchain on its own won't change everything. It has the potential to change everything, but we'd be blind if we didn't realise that the big labels, the big technology companies aren't also using blockchain, making plans for blockchain. But what it does provide us with is a moment in time where we can, change the landscape, where we can see some debate. People do need to get involved, and that's why, I'd love you all to get involved. Resonate, come and talk to me. Keep an eye on Imaging Heaps, activities with Mycelia. The people are trying to create movements and methods of working with blockchain and changing things.
Brenda, we were talking before, and you were saying that you were quite wary of the bigger companies investing millions in blockchain, and why were they doing that, and is it really supporting artists?
Well, I think, there's, huge, like Cobalt have, putting 150 million into, stuff, but, you've still got to recoup that back, so blockchains, the idea of blockchain is fantastic, but everyone's developing these, silo blockchain platforms, but what the real issue is that these blockchain platforms can't talk to each other, so, the payment systems are very limited, so, we're all trying to develop our own little blockchains, but we're only still using our immediate customer base. So the real innovation in technology needs to come to help those blockchains talk to each other, and then work out everyone's, then can trade their tokenized economy on a global level, because it's all about cutting out the payment systems and the third man, as Terry said.
The other way of looking at it is to get people to talk to each other and join the same blockchain.
Yes.
We're working with a Seattle-based blockchain cooperative called RChain. They're talking to lots of different people, and also Imogen Heap's project is trying to bring lots of people in. It's not just striking out.
But this is what I think is really interesting about, because then it becomes very competitive in itself, because, Benji, who's got this thing called .bc out in New York, he was the first person, the figurehead in music that I kind of heard about that was driving blockchain. And so, you know, why can't we all just pick one and use that? But no one will, because we're all, you know, we're all creative and want to do our own thing. But you know, there's many issues around how it can work. So you don't want to not have competitive companies kind of trying to do stuff, because we're all trying to make money at the end of the day. And you know, it's, if these blockchains exist in a silo ecosystem, then you know we still need to kind of connect them, and that's where you need all the developers, you know, to kind of crack that.
At the moment, those blockchain companies is a bit like the Avengers. Bear with me on this one, where everybody's Batman and Superman. They're all superheroes in their individual right, and they're all doing fantastic things, but they just don't quite get along, and they don't really see eye to eye. So, put Batman and Superman on the same job, you probably won't get the same results as get the other one there. So there's lots of people doing great things, but you're right, that you can only really have one massive blockchain if all the blockchains are one blockchain. Otherwise, it just isn't going to work. You can have all these siloed databases that don't talk to each other, and the entire thing will be pointless.
Yeah.
But maybe,
I mean, it's pointless.
well, no, it doesn't. Maybe, perhaps, when we had the dot-com bubble that burst turn of the century, there was a massive explosion of people doing all these random things because they suddenly thought, oh, we can sell online, let's do there. And then it all imploded. And then it took a couple of years, and it woke back up again. And now we have the behemoth and the social media and all the massive, amazing stuff we do. And the blockchain only works because of the internet in the first place. So remember, this current very time, it's exciting, but it's probably the first phase of semi-mainstream blockchain use. So we, as companies and as users, we're only just really trying to figure out what the hell is going on and what we use it for. And I think probably in 5 years' time, once it's going to burst and then come back up again, we'll maybe see what it is actually about.
I mean, I think there's, obviously you've got big companies like Ditto and, you know, having that instant customer base and to use the test straight away is like massive, you know, and obviously Spotify, but I don't know whether the bigger you are, like when you get Spotify, obviously they're investing millions into it as well. If it's harder to kind of infiltrate blockchain into an existing huge back end, or you know, I don't know. I'm really interested to see how you guys kind of develop this partnership and how you bring that into your.
Yeah, with us, we partner with a company called Eden Chain, who are based partly in Vietnam, partly in Hong Kong. So basically, they give you the tools to build your own blockchain. So that's what we do. So we're going to be having total transparent accountability for every song and every artist and what guitar track Terry played on last Tuesday or something, and if he got played in Cambodia the day after. And also monetising artists. There's something called an ICO, which is initial coin offering, where someone has. It's just a way of getting funding, really. So if you're trying to fund your company, you'll do this initial coin offering, and people will buy into your coin, which means you get money and so forth. But there is a danger to that, which is I was at a crypto summit a few months ago, and there was it was probably the first mainstream conference I've been to that isn't music, and there was one company there, and thankfully I can't remember their name because it might embarrass them, but they were vaguely music orientated. They were data, but they're kind of attached to the music industry, more like royalties, that kind of stuff. And I had a look while he was talking. I thought, finally someone from my industry. Looked him up on my phone to see what the website was, and there was no mention on the website anywhere of the word blockchain or crypto or anything whatsoever. I think basically they just sandwiched the word blockchain or Bitcoin into their bio to get onto a summit and paid a bit of money. And if I say that the guy was there he was in his 50s and he was wearing a green leather jacket and sparkling shoes.
Sounds good to me.
It didn't work on him. It works on you and you look good at it, but it did not work on him. You could tell that he's at a very formal event and he's clearly trying to be that music industry guy who's crazy and rock and roll and all this kind of stuff. And I had a look at his normal press shots and he's there wearing a shirt and tie. So it definitely wasn't him. You know, if that's him and he's an old punk, fantastic. But it was not him. He was an office guy who normally wears a shirt and tie and has a very boring haircut. So there is that danger that people can say the word blockchain and just as a magic word to get money. This is what it used to be, like back in the day when it was social media network. Add £1 million. So that there is that danger when people get into it for the wrong reasons.
There is a lot of hype.
There is,
Hype.
and deservedly so, But you've got to watch the companies who get into it for the wrong reason. Have a look at what their website was a year ago. Did they sandwich in the word blockchain? Are they not actually a music company? They actually sell heating or insurance, but they've sandwiched the word blockchain in, tokenized everything for no particular reason. Or are they actually coming from the ethical standpoint and, you know, something that, do they have a good startup story? I've seen Brendan's startup story on his TEDx, fantastic, about why he started the company for the right reasons, which means he'll still be here in 5-10 years' time. If you start a company to make money, sandwich the word blockchain in, you won't be.
I think it's all about your friends though, isn't it? You judge people a lot by their friends, and so if you see people aren't talking to other people, then that's the kind of red flag warning. If you see people are sort of cooperating and collaborating, then that's a really, really good sign.
Great. So I guess maybe just seeing if anyone's got anything more they want to add before we ask for some questions. You've got it all covered.
I've said far too much as it is. I apologise. Sorry.
I think what's great to see is that everyone's really passionate
Yeah.
about, you know, about people, about fairness and
Yeah,
transparency.
I think, you know, just like to add, like, as an early stage startup, it's very interesting to see opinions of investors, and, you know, I think at the end of the day, you know, this technology is going to take time to develop, but I think, you know, my struggle is, you know, you have to enter a really complicated industry and try and monetize quickly and find a model that works, that you're not spending, you know, because there's so many companies that are just getting so much money invested into just developing the tech side. You know, you still have to recoup that as a business.
Yeah, this is the kind of the slight paradox in starting a creative company, is you have to start it with the right intention. You have to start it thinking, this is what I want to do, I don't care if it makes money. That is idea number one. The second day you think, oh crap, I've got to pay the bills. But there is some kind of middle ground there. But if you give people something they can use, something that's honest, something that's genuine, and people can find a worth from it. I mean, a few years ago it used to be widgets or SMS codes or all this garbage. If you give people something they can use and they will actually adopt, then it will happen. And you do have to make money to pay the bills. You know, if you can get investment, that's great. Or, you know, but even then, what happens if the investment money runs out? You know, you've still got to actually have this is the music business after all. The music comes first, obviously, but the business has to be there. Because otherwise, a year later, you'll be back working in accounts for the insurance company. So there is some kind of middle ground there. We have to do it for the right reasons, to figure out a way to make money honestly as well.
It's also about giving people something to believe in, and we always think it's about purpose before product. The product's important, but it's the ethics and purpose that we
Exactly right, because so many people have launched a product or service to the music industry and it's completely useless and there's loads of hype and it's only built to make X company a bunch of money. That's about it. If you create a product or a service that actually has a worth, it will still be there in 5 years' time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm quite interested about the intellectual property side of things, but it's just how, like, obviously the way we see it has only been around for like 100 years, and are we just romanticising about something that was, and that, like, obviously we've managed to make loads and loads of money out of this industry in the last, because it would seem like an absolute gold mine at the time with printing vinyl and that kind of thing, and having this physical, tangible thing that people had.
Yeah.
But then back in the day, bards were playing towards kings for their supper.
Yeah.
Like, we've almost created this fantasy world about musicians and making a lot of money. Do you think we actually are going to have to rethink how we see these kind of things? And even when you're talking about how there are big artists sort of dominating the place, and you see in the top 40 you've got a handful of writers writing everything that's up there, and they've monopolised these ideas, they've monopolised riffs and melodies and song structures, and obviously they're holding those things which are familiar for the wide audience, for global audience, and the people are resonating with a lot, and they've monopolised those ideas. Do you think we are going to have to rethink how we approach intellectual property? So I probably questions.
That was really good.
Can I give just a very quick answer? There was a very direct relationship between the bard singing for the supper and the supper. I sing, you give me supper. You may be very rich and I'm very poor, but you still get the supper.
Yeah.
And then we've gone through this, as you pointed out, there's a revolution and recorded music, and this is definitely the time of a second revolution, and I'm sure Matt's got what to say.
I always do, but Brendan, first.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say.
I'll rant, but please, someone say something good before I start.
I'm going to say anything good, but I think, obviously we're in this age where free economy, and you just build your free audience and everything's free, and companies are creating, valuation companies are huge on other people's content, so I think as an artist, I think it's the interesting thing that we're looking to do is, try and challenge that conversation and make early stage. So we're very focused around early stage artists, the roots of grassroots, as we call it, and finding those artists that have amazing tunes, and then trying to work with those artists in a platform that helps them really change the way they think about and value their IP. So, because as soon as you put your music out there, because we're coming from a slightly different angle to say, people will nick it. Producers will just try and take an 8-bar thing of your song and then create a song out of that. That's what happens in the industry. It's, no one likes to talk about it, but, I know we can influence each other through music, and if you're influenced from songs that have been released and made hits, but then if you're influenced from a song that hasn't been out there and created money yet, what's the value of that? So we want to try and create this environment that helps that and helps people rethink the value of IP, whether or not it's a lost case, whether IP will become completely unvaluable and there'll be ways to make money from it in different ways. I don't know, but I think you've got to try and stand up and make people think. Whatever direction it goes, I don't know, because it's all sort of dependent on technology and how you can gatekeep that,
I think with the Bard and the King thing is a really good example, because back then, if Bard wants to eat, he has one option. If the King doesn't like his song, he just doesn't eat. And the King doesn't like his song for a week, he starves, and that's it. And his family leave, and his wife leaves him, and his kids hate him. So, they had one option. Whereas now, if you put him into today's digital economy, he has a toolbox of 100 different ways where he doesn't have to do just one thing and hope it works. He can do the co-op streaming, he can put his music online, he can play a show to people, he can stream the live show into someone's bedroom in Trinidad. There's so many different options of things he can do. It's not just one option anymore. And so to extent it is up to the artist. We've had this digital revolution, and the digital marketplace is exactly what you want it to be. And it's so broad, you can make so much more money than you ever used to before. Even with streaming, if you downloaded a song, you would only ever make like 60 something pence, whatever it is, of a download. That is all the money you would ever make. Whereas if you played that track once a week for the next 20 years, you will make exponentially more money than that. Because there's no more finite money to how much you can make from a song. It's not like you have CDs and that's it. There's so much more out there for artists, but it is up to the artists to figure out, but also how to connect with their fans. You don't see the latest boy band with a vinyl record. It's just not going to work. So you have to work out how to connect with those fans, and then use that. So there's so many avenues. Pick the right one. Don't spread yourself too thinly. If you're doing literally 100 different ways to make money, you're going to do them all badly. Whereas if you pick a handful, 3, 4 at the most, like with social media networks, don't be on more than, say, 4. Even 3, the less the better. Some bands aren't on Twitter at all, or aren't on Instagram, or whatever, they just pick something small, pick your niche, work out how to make money from it, and work out what your fans want as well. But the marketplace is wide open.
The other thing on IP very quickly is, of course, with AI and increased use of AI, there's more automatic monitoring of riffs and sounds, and that will increasingly play a part. But that's a subject for a whole other panel.
More on the musical side of things, you said you work with Imogen Heap a lot. She's kind of like a kind of personified idea of this whole bringing the future into music and really thinking about it quite differently to how everybody else is doing things. And would you say that she's particularly inspired your company and And what do you think about, I guess, musically people going completely against the grain, a bit like what
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, Imogen Heap, it's very interesting, her history, which she talks about a lot when she talks at events, because she was signed to a major label, she's done her own self-releasing project. The founder of Resonate has been working with Imogen Heap for quite a long time, kind of in parallel, so she didn't sort of inspire the company, but we inspire each other and work with each other. And I think it's absolutely fantastic that she is this sort of figurehead for artists being deeply involved in shaping this, and I think everyone should check out what she's doing if they don't already know. And at Music Tech Fest she's on this world tour, Mycelia World Tour, and they're bringing technology workshops and demonstrations and performance as well to 40 cities now around the globe, and trying to make a difference each time. And they did 2 hacks at Music Tech Fest. One was this one around blockchain audience, and the other was around the Mycelia interface, where you can just put your information once and register a song, and then it sort of sends it out to platforms it's linked into. So definitely watch
I think what she's doing is really interesting, because it shows what's possible. It is possible for a woman in music to define her own career and do whatever the hell she wants to do, and come up with really interesting ways to make money and connect with her fans. And that is possible. That is what happens if you use the digital marketplace correctly. You become an Imogen Heap. There's a whole few steps in between that. But it's been inspirational, because it shows exactly what can be achieved. But I mean, I've been playing in a band in 10 years, but even when I speak to bands now, there's still quite a lot of old school thinking, which is I have to get signed to a label, I have to send my demo off to an A&R guy. I mean, that stuff just doesn't exist anymore. You know, the majors will sign whoever's on X Factor and whatever they've got in the factory that week. That stuff, that old model is gone. You know, play live shows, yes, because you like them and hopefully you'll get some money out of them, but you're not going to play a live show and an A&R man walks in and gives you a big record contract. Those days are absolutely dead. But what they have given us is people like Imogen Heap to say all those things. Forget about what happened 20 years ago. That stuff died a death. Go do an Imogen Heap thing, be interesting, make good music, and just define your own rules and do whatever the hell you want and connect with your fans, and then you will make a living out of it. And you won't be on the beck and call of someone else. You won't be the bard and the king, and like if the king doesn't like your music, you starve. You know, you can define what you want. Why didn't you go outside and play to the people, or go, someone else? You know, you're just burying a hole for yourself, whereas you're actually looking from the top of a large hill or mountain.
Thanks. I think we've got time for one more question. No. Okay, thank you so much. That was really,
Thank you.
really nice.